and welcome to Taiwan Today. I am Natalie Tso. The Kuomintang has just chosen their presidential candidate, Kaohsiung Mayor Han Kuo-yu. And here to talk with us about Han's candidacy and the presidential race is Asia political risk analyst Ross Feingold. Ross, it's great to have you on the show.
Thank you.
So it is big news. The KMT finally chose their candidate. Why do you think Han was able to win the candidacy?
You hit on one of the key issues here, finally, because this process played out a little bit longer than the KMT probably might have liked. Keeping in mind that coming out of the local election last November, KMT did very well. So they had a lot of momentum. And now this process got much slower. There was a lot of voters, KMT supporters, who were eagerly encouraging Han to join the election. Then late in the game, Tycoon Terry Go got into the election.
That's right.
And there was the candidate who thought he would easily get the nomination, which was the KMT's candidate from 2016, Eric Chu. So this process went on a little longer, but why did Han win is because just like in last November's local election, it really appears that he had the most enthusiasm. So without getting into the process itself, the process of the telephone poll, it's clear that across Taiwan, people who are interested in helping the KMT select its candidate, among KMT supporters more specifically, Han clearly had more enthusiasm. So that probably carried around, say, to the people in their circle. So if you were a Han supporter and you had a lot of enthusiasm, you might have said to your friends or family, if you get that phone call in the telephone poll, please support Han. I support Han. I'm a big fan. So I'd like you to support him as well. So there's probably this carryover effect. That would not have happened with Terry Go or Eric Chu. They just didn't have that enthusiasm about them among people who were likely to answer all those questions. Keeping in mind, if you got that phone call for this telephone poll, you would have had to spend a long time on the phone because there were about 9 questions total about where do you live, where you registered to vote, the 6 questions having to do with the polls, then also your gender. So it takes a lot of time to answer the questions. And maybe not everyone had the patience to do that. But people supporting Han definitely had that enthusiasm.
That's true. So what do you think is Han's appeal? I mean, he's been a new political star ever since he ran for Kaohsiung Mayor and got that, post in a very dramatic way, a dramatic win. What is his charm? What is his charisma? What is his appeal?
Well, I'm sure he'd appreciate all those nice things you've said about him, that he's got
well,
charm
got something
and charisma.
He has something.
Well, if we go back to the election campaign last year, the local elections, and specifically Kaohsiung Mayor, it was Han versus Chen Chi-mai, a very experienced politician, well-liked within the DPP, but that charisma wasn't there for Chen Chi-mai during the election. As nice a guy as he is, he just didn't have that energy, that charisma that Han Kuo-yu brought to that election campaign season. And it was a sprint, right? Those last few months from not even around this time, but more so from like late August, September, until the elections, which were on November 24th last year, Han had all this enthusiasm. He had a lot of charisma. His speeches at his rallies really excited his supporters. A very good social media presence. There's some accusations that his social media presence was helped by people from outside Taiwan. And there's definitely some of that went on. And this has all been discussed in detail in the Taiwan as well as the international media. But ultimately, it came down to a lot of enthusiasm from the candidate himself, from Han Kuo-yu. And that, in turn, inspired a lot of voters to support him. It wasn't really about specifics of policy. Actually, Chen Chi-mai had a lot more specifics of policy. But the same thing now has happened over the last few months in the KMT primary. Eric Chu, just like Chen Chi-mai, a really nice guy. A lot of experience in different levels of local government, central government. A lot of good policy ideas. Very intelligent guy, very successful guy as far as his political career. But didn't seem to have the charisma, didn't inspire the enthusiasm among voters. Terry Go, a brilliant businessman. We all know that. He's globally famous for his success and more recently assembling products for Apple and the iPhone. We all know that's what his background is. So he could talk about business and how he'd improve the economy. But again, he just didn't seem to inspire that same enthusiasm. And for him, it might have just been too late. If this campaign season had been many months longer, he might have been able to make that point a little stronger. That, look, I have the business experience. I'm the guy who could really help with the economy, and that's why you should select me as the KMT candidate. But he got in too late. And Han was just the same guy that he was last year, that same enthusiasm among his supporters. It carried over. And again, that's why he was able to win by a relatively large margin.
So he has a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of slogans, but is this enough for him to get elected as president, because he doesn't have much experience as a city mayor. He's only been a mayor for 6 or 7 months.
He might be asking himself that same question. The next day after he won the primary, he might have said the same thing to himself. What are my policies going to be? In fact, this came up with the media. The media said, well, what are your policies, Mr. Mayor or Mr. Candidate? And he said, well, my national policies, I'll put them in writing and distribute it for people to understand what my policies are. So he's going to need to come out with those policies clearly, whatever the issue is, whether it's social spending, elder care, education or child care for youngsters. And that was something that Terry Go was talking a lot about during his campaign. Obviously, defense, national defense. He's going to be really criticized from the DPP and by the incumbent president Taiwan on defense issues, China policy, of course. So there might still be I wouldn't call it a honeymoon period, but people are saying, okay, let's give this guy a break. He just won the nomination. But that's not going to last long. He's really going to have to start distributing some policies and doing so soon.
And he gets a lot of coverage on China-backed media here in Taiwan. And what do you think, how do you think that's going to work for him or against him?
Well, his enthusiastic supporters watch that station or they read that newspaper. So for them, it doesn't matter because they already are Han supporters. So they want to see a lot of Han Kuo-yu news. They'll just keep watching the same TV station or reading the same newspaper. They're not going to get frustrated by that coverage. And in fact, that now those media can say, look, the guy's the KMT candidate. Of course, we got to give him a lot of coverage. The other stations are going to have to give him the amount of coverage that is due to the KMT candidate. Look, the KMT is one of the 2 major political parties here in Taiwan. Right now, they're the opposition party. They were the ruling party for 8 years. So whoever their presidential candidate is, whether it was Eric Zhu, Terry Go, or Han Kuo-yu, all the networks have to give him, the amount of coverage that's due to the KMT candidate. So in fact, we're going to see more Han now on the other TV stations and newspapers. So if you didn't like it before, you could have changed the channel from the stations that gave him too much coverage. But now you're going to see him on all the other TV stations as well.
What about the ties to China, that kind of coverage, basically you see that he must have some kind of tie to China, or China likes him, right? And that he also met with the Beijing liaison offices when he was in Hong Kong.
Right. It's certainly the accusation that the TV networks, owned by the Wang Group, has pro-Han coverage, right?
Right.
And the data is clear on this,
right?
Right. They add up how many minutes of time on the air or space in their newspaper that they've given to Han versus other politicians. It's clear that they give a lot more coverage to Han, and they started doing that last year. Wang Group, like a lot of Taiwan companies, does a lot of business in China. They make money in China. So people say, well, they're subsidized by China. I would say it's a little more nuanced than that. It's any Taiwan company and a lot of multinational companies, they do business in China. They get tax breaks or they get breaks on rent or other issues. It's a subsidy. And it's very easy to make the leap to say, well, that means it's China helping Han. Again, it's a little more nuanced than that. Mm-hmm. But is it true that the ownership of this TV station newspapers do a lot of business in China? Yes. Do they have close relations with the Chinese government? Absolutely. So do a lot of Taiwan companies. But do they give a lot of positive media coverage to Han? Absolutely, there's no doubt about that as well. So this is going to be something that the DPP, President Tsai, media that don't like Han are going to constantly remind voters about. They're going to say, look, this media group does a lot of business in China. We all know that they have a good relationship with the Chinese government. His positions are probably going to be very similar to former President Ma Ying-jeou. He's going to talk about the 92 consensus. The government's going to say there is no 92 consensus anymore. It's now one country, 2 systems, and we reject that. And of course, Han Kuo-yu also said, over my dead body, I reject
right.
one country, 2 systems for Taiwan. But that's going to be the key point, right? We're going to hear that a lot from the government, from President Tsai, from media that is more partial to President Tsai, that he is too close to China, or the media that is too close to China supports him, and they're all working together to elect Han. So that'll be the key point that we'll hear from the other side.
So with the candidates we have so far, President Tsai Ing-wen and Kaohsiung Mayor Han Kuo-yu, tell me what you think their strengths and weaknesses are.
President Tsai is going to focus on her policies that she began to implement from the time she took office in May of 2016. So economic policy, she's had her 5+2, so focusing on key core industries for Taiwan's future economic growth, most of which is technology related. Her elder care policies, that's something that her government put a lot of effort in. pension reform, something that was very controversial over the last few years. But again, her government implemented a lot of changes. Their majority in the Li-Fa Yuan, the legislative yuan, passed laws to change the pension systems in Taiwan. So she's going to be talking about the things that she has done. I've done this. She'll probably say, I need more time to continue to do these things, but my policies have worked in the economic sphere, but I need some more time. Also with the social spending as well. And then China, she's going to say that I'm the person with the policy to face the risks of China. She'll cite some of the changes to national security laws that her government has implemented in recent months. And she's going to cite the military investments, military spending, military budget that we have seen in the last few years, increasing domestic military research and development to build more locally, as well as a recent announcement by the United States that it will sell additional weapons to Taiwan. So she'll cite that. She'll cite the strength of her relationship with the United States. So she's going to say, I'm the steady person. My policies have worked. I need more time to continue to implement these policies. And the other candidates, all unknown. They don't have this experience. They don't have the foreign policy experience. They don't have the national economic development experience that I have. Han Kuo-yu, he's going to say, your policies didn't work. Right? He'll say that economic growth is too slow. It's not as strong as other countries, regions in the region. There may be some truth to that. It's not clear. I mean, Taiwan's economic growth over the last few years, maybe it's not very great, but the other places haven't been so great either, whether you're looking at South Korea, Hong Kong, Singapore. Generally, Taiwan's economic growth is in line. But Han Kuo-yu is going to say being in line is not good enough. It's too slow. We want to achieve 3%. Being satisfied with 2% is not good enough. Of course, Ma Ying-jeou also promised he'd bring a lot of economic growth to Taiwan and didn't really achieve his goals either. But Han will say, your policies just don't work. On China, he'll say, your policies have led to tension. So if you want less tension with China, trust my policies. What is his policy going to be? As we were talking about earlier, probably a return to something like a 92 consensus, something close to President Ma Ying-jeou's policies. And he'll say, look, I have the ability to talk to them. President Tsai's government can't talk to China. Now, we know that's mostly China's fault. It's not the fault of President Tsai's government. But that's the message Han Kuo-yu will give to the voters of Taiwan, and we'll see whether or not the voters are willing to accept that message.
So it should be an interesting race to watch, right?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Ross
Feingold,
for coming on the show. I've been speaking with Asia political risk analyst Ross Feingold about the KMT candidate Han Kuo-yu and also the presidential race. Taiwan is going to elect its next president in January. Thanks for tuning in to Taiwan Today. I'm Natalie Tso.